Welcome back. It's time for our first full panel session of the conference. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine will be developing the next Decadal Survey on biological and physical sciences research in space for the years 2023 through 2032. This survey will serve as a critical framework to shape the upcoming vision and strategy for research efforts in the areas of biological and physical sciences in space. Our next panel of distinguished guests represents the National Academies, NASA, academia, and the German Aerospace Center, and they will discuss the nature of future research in space with Jeff Foust from Space News. Let me tell you about Jeff Foust. He's a senior staff writer for Space News, joining the publication in 2014. He covers civil and commercial space topics, ranging from NASA programs to developments in the entrepreneurial new space field. He has more than a decade of experience writing about space policy, about commercial space, and related topics. He earned a Ph.D. in planetary sciences from MIT in 1999 and a B.S. with honors in geophysics and planetary science from the California Institute of Technology in 1993. Welcome, Jeff, and welcome to your panel.
Thank you, Krystyn, for the kind introduction, and welcome everybody to this panel on the future of ISS research. After more than 2 decades, research on the International Space Station is hitting its stride. Thanks to the Commercial Crew Program, enabling larger crews on the station and maturing research capabilities, the amount of crew time available to research has grown, as well as the breadth and depth of the research that's being done. For example, some of the research payloads flying to the station next week on the Cygnus cargo spacecraft range from fluid physics to engineered muscle cells to slime molds. But what will come in the next decade? What kind of research can we expect on the station during that time? And what does the eventual transition from the International Space Station to commercial space stations mean for research? We've assembled a panel of experts from government and academia to explore those issues, including the role that the Decadal Survey that Krystyn mentioned will play in that effort. We're going to have each of our panelists give some opening remarks, and we'll follow by some panel discussion. You're welcome at any point during this discussion to submit questions through the conference platform, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible over the course of the next hour. Our first panelist is Krystyn Van Vliet. She is the Michael and Sonja Koerner Professor of Material Science and Engineering and Biological Engineering at MIT. She joined the MIT faculty in the Department of Material Science and Engineering in 2004 and leads the Laboratory for Material Chemomechanics. She received a dual appointment to the Biological Engineering faculty in 2011. She served as co-chair with Rob Furl of the National Academy's current Decadal Survey for Biological and Physical Science Research in Space for 2023-2032. She also has served as MIT's Associate Provost since 2017. She earned her bachelor's degree in material science and engineering from Brown University in 1998 and her Ph.D. in material science and engineering from MIT in 2002. So, Krystyn, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. And thank you for taking the time, everyone, for hearing more about this Decadal Survey. As Jeff mentioned, Rob Furl and I co-chair this Decadal Survey, but it's a huge community effort. Not just the folks at the National Academies who help support this and the folks we interact with at NASA in terms of the statement of task, but all of you who are contributing ideas, questions, concerns as we really project into the future. So as Krystyn mentioned, this Decadal Survey is to look ahead for what are our scientific priorities in the research, the experiments, the platforms, and the questions we'll answer over the next decade of 2023 to 2032. That's a great opportunity to think about what are the scientific discoveries that we would like to aspire to make in that space environment or enabled by that space environment. Discoveries that could also aid the technology used for space exploration or enable new approaches on Earth. So it's a huge benefit that part of that process of the Decadal is the white papers that come from the community. And that call, as you can find online, is open now. Those white papers are due in the fall and the winter, so in this calendar year. And we really look forward to everyone putting forth their ideas. The process we can discuss in more detail, but the white papers allow you to propose specific experiments, research questions, problems that need to be addressed, as well as research campaigns that are more complex and might involve multiple missions and multiple research questions. So we're looking forward to engaging the community. It will be an intense couple of years, but very important as we chart the priorities for the science community in biological and physical sciences for the next decade to come. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Krystyn. Next up is Doug Mattson. He is the chair of the ISS National Laboratory User Advisory Committee, and he leads the science subcommittee. He is an associate professor in the Mechanical Engineering Department at Tufts University and an adjunct associate professor in the Tisch College of Citizenship and Public Service. He has numerous reduced gravity physical science experience, including parabolic aircraft missions, sounding rockets, drop tube experiments, shuttle experiments. He is the principal investigator on 2 ongoing NASA-sponsored space experiments on the space station, a thermophysical property measurement program using the JAXA electrostatic levitation furnace, and a solidification phase selection program using the ESA electromagnetic levitator. He received his bachelor's degrees in chemical engineering from Cornell University and in mechanical engineering from Cal State Sacramento, his master's degree in material science from UC Davis, and his Ph.D. in material engineering from MIT. So, Doug.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to speak with everyone today. I'd like to start off with a recognition that there's many new platforms that will be coming in the near future to allow us to augment the activities in low Earth orbit, or LEO. And thus we should look at what are the advantages to the ISS National Lab. What's special? Well, the first is that there's a long duration, high quality microgravity environment. It serves as a convenient staging area for missions beyond LEO or resupply of free flyers. 2 of the big things are sample return is common practice. So if you have some experiment that you run, you can bring it back to Earth for future evaluations. And we have the opportunity for significant astronaut time to help us run experiments on the station. My own personal experiences relate to the collaborations with international agencies, the JAXA program with the electrostatic levitation, or ELF, and the European Space Agency's ISS-EML, the electromagnetic levitator, put together through our operations outside using DLR in Cologne. The advantages for these international collaborations are we have multiple investigators looking at different things and having different goals on the same sample. And this is taking a page from a lot of the work that's done in biology, where biological sciences, you'll have an organism and several investigators will study the same organism simultaneously. This is a huge advantage. So now that we've looked at current practice, where do we go in the next decade? Well, first off, I think a strong emphasis is going to continue with looking at fundamental biological and physical science activities, but we'll be expanding the emphasis on applied research. There's a new mission. We're going to the moon, we'll establish colonies, and we'll go on to Mars. So part of that applied research activity is coordinating things as part of this user advisory committee, which has been put together by CASIS and ISS National Labs. Basically, we'd like to evolve the relationship between the agency and our commercial partners. There'll be a bunch of new educational opportunities for us in these new experiments that will be run. And my own personal interest is in space manufacturing. You can't bring duplicates of every part that can malfunction with you, so you need to be able to fabricate key items on an as-needed basis. A lot of new work will be done in areas such as that. So that concludes my opening remarks. Thank you very much, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Next up is Tara Rutley. She is currently the Associate Chief Scientist for Gravitational Research at NASA headquarters in the Office of the Chief Scientist. Her role consists of representing and communicating the biological and physical science research performed in low Earth orbit platforms such as the ISS, and supporting NASA's Chief Scientist in developing research recommendations for the agency as NASA plans to return humans to the moon. She pursued her bachelor's degrees in biology and master's degrees in mechanical engineering from Colorado State University, and then a Ph.D. in neuroscience while working as a biomedical engineer for the medical equipment and human research hardware used on the space station. So Tara, over to you.
Hi, thanks for having me today. And first, what I'd like to say is that if you have played any role at all in the International Space Station program in the past 20 years that it's been in operation, you are now a part of really important history. And most of you who are watching probably are part of that history and have played a role, and I hope you take some time to think about that for a minute. Think about your role. It's incredible over these last 2 decades. Now, we also, if you're new and you're just joining us today, well, welcome to the next few decades, because it's really exciting time, especially for scientists. So since I began at NASA in 2001, my entire career has been dedicated to the International Space Station program in some way or another. And at the time I joined, NASA space shuttles were actively assembling the station, and we and our Russian colleagues had just sent the first crew to the station in 2000. And back then, any chatter that I'd heard about non-agency vehicles launching to that space station wasn't really any part of any serious discussion. We just never imagined anyone other than NASA really visiting that station. I remember then when I joined the Space Station Science Office in 2009, we were on the verge of what we called assembly complete. And that happened in 2011 when all efforts were turning from now building that vehicle and now using it for the laboratory it was really meant to be. Right around then in 2011 as well, CASIS was selected to run the National Laboratory to maximize access to non-NASA research. And here we are today. Now we're here welcoming different industry vehicles to the station for both crew and cargo, with lots of experience in cargo and upcoming new exciting things for crew. And we have 2 decades of experience of people from NASA to academia, to industry, to other government agencies and international partners having made history. So as a scientist, it's been really super cool, great timing for me to have been able to be a part of all of it. So now here we are. Time for another decadal study in the biological and physical sciences in space. But to be able to look forward to that next decade, it's important to look back, I think, at what we've accomplished with the ISS based on the 2011 recommendations from the Decadal Survey. Now, these successes that we've had come in the form of space exploration, Earth-based benefits, and advancements in scientific knowledge. And as you heard our administrator say, and our program managers say, we have put out almost 3,000 publications scientifically, and that's a lot of knowledge to share with the scientific community, both for space research and non-space research. And we've represented over 4,000 researchers from around the globe. Now, past examples of some experiments and some successes we've had from the 2011 Decadal Survey would include a regular rodent research program as animal models to study the health of crew and those on Earth, a microbial observatory, cataloging the different organisms such as bacteria that might make up the closed environment of the International Space Station. We've seen advancements in the complexity of crop type plants grown for possible food for space exploration, grown in the veggie unit. And we've seen combustions experiments that lead to a new line of research in cool flames, which teaches us about flame ignition and extinguishing fires in space, but also has roles in advancing combustion technology on Earth. We've also, of course, as you heard from Kate Rubin, seen advancements in genetics with the first ever sequencing of DNA in space, which is, of course, interesting to not just space scientists, so we can identify what's going on up there, but also for traditional scientists as they seek to use the unique microgravity environment of the space station. Some of our commercial advancements have included examples through the National Lab of Merck's crystallization research of their Keytruda drug to improve its formulation for treating cancer. Lambda Vision has shown that thin layer deposition in microgravity could be used as they work to develop and improve protein-based artificial retina to improve eyesight. And we've even seen Procter & Gamble's series of advanced colloid experiments for a while. They've been working on this to improve the shelf life and stability of things like your shampoo or laundry detergent. So those are just a few examples of what's been accomplished since the last decadal. And the next 10 years rightfully gives us brand new challenges to identify the highest value research that should be performed to support the agency's 2 largest goals for human exploration. And as you heard from previous speakers, the first one is to return humans to the moon to live sustainably with the Artemis program, to stay longer than we ever had before. And the second major goal that we've got is to develop a commercial economy in low Earth orbit. And that includes the use of station and the addition of new commercial R&D destinations from industry, free flyers perhaps. So for Artemis to live sustainably on the moon, there are research questions that need to be answered, like what kinds of materials will we need to build the infrastructure that we'll need to withstand these extreme environments? How can we use the resources already available there to provide the basic necessities that humans need to survive? And what are the high-value biological and physical sciences investigations that should be performed in these new environments? How can we advance the textbook knowledge, the fundamental research knowledge that we can gain from these environments? So the work that'll go into building this next decadal is going to yield another decade or more of transformative research recommendations that are critical to achieving these big goals. And what facilities will be needed, both in space on Earth, will be discussed. The questions such as what roles do NASA and non-NASA government organizations, commercial, and our international partners play in these biological and physical science activities in space? And how do we account for the currently unknown and, of course, inevitable advancements in technology that we're going to need to incorporate that we can't even imagine yet over the next decade? And so these are important questions that really are going to be exciting to answer. Looking forward to things like we've got regolith printing payloads launching next week. We've got human physiology studies from HRP. Advanced materials are important for the future of research on station. Things like complex metal alloys and crystal growth. You've heard Doug talk about additive manufacturing, 3D printing. And you'll hear from our speakers in the next 2 days about things like regenerative medicine and tissue engineering. And those experts will be happy to talk all about their plans for the use of low Earth orbit to advance even stem cells, organoids, and biofabrication. So now, you, the scientists, you who are watching, and the engineers who are watching, you represent the range of disciplines of science and engineering, and you are invited to share your research ideas on concepts and capabilities that will help us answer the most important science questions facing us in the next decade. So I look forward to seeing what you have to offer, and I look forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tara, for that. We're going to skip ahead to our next panelist, who is Richard Houston. He is the Schlegel Research Chair in Vascular Aging and Brain Health in the Schlegel University of Waterloo Research Institute for Aging and a Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. He is the PI of 6 experiments selected for research on the space station. His research is exploring the underlying mechanisms for the accelerated aging-like changes in the cardiovascular systems of astronauts, using tools such as ultrasound investigations and oral glucose tolerance testing in space. Richard. Richard, you need to unmute.
Yes, the wonders of
the wonders of
virtual meetings. Okay, sorry, I will start over. Okay, so thank you very much, Jeff, and thanks everyone for inviting me to take part in this really exciting presentation today. I've been really fortunate since 2007 when we launched our first astronaut experiment up to the space station. We've been able to continuously carry on a program of cardiovascular research. It's developed from, really being first focused on the problem at that time, which was blood pressure regulation when astronauts return. There was a lot of suggestion, some evidence that, astronauts would be more likely to be fainting when they came back from space. And, at that time they were landing on shuttles. So there was a real concern that, astronaut health was at risk. NASA's done a great job of working on that problem. And, there are still astronauts who come back who could faint, but there are enough mechanisms or countermeasures in place that we no longer consider that a really major risk. My own personal research has sort of evolved from there into, well, and I guess, a little bit of a story about how I got interested and excited about space physiology in the first place. I mean, I'm an exercise cardiovascular physiologist, and as such, we're looking at how maintaining exercise on a regular basis is healthy for the cardiovascular system. You put someone in space and you make them float around, that's the ultimate sedentary lifestyle. So being able to come up with the exercise programs, evaluate them, see how they work. NASA's developed different treadmill technology, different resistive exercise devices, and so on. But we're still seeing that there's some negative effect of floating for essentially 22 to 23 hours per day. That's still not healthy. So what needs to happen then is, as we go forward, as we continue the research on the space station, as we're looking forward to going to the moon and perhaps to Mars, things will change. So what I see over the next 10 years is, well, first of all, NASA has a program in place right at the moment. It's called CIPHER. CIPHER integrates about 15 or so different research investigators projects into one big massive project, which will really try to integrate different components of how the human physiology reacts and comes together. And we'll be investigating 10 astronauts who live in space for 1 year. That really starts pushing you to the point where now you can start to see whether or not there are changes going to be taking place when people start living on the moon. If they live there for a year or perhaps longer, what are the consequences of that? And some of the things that we still can't totally address on ISS, but we can start thinking about. The radiation exposure is going to change once we get beyond the Van Allen belt. Galactic cosmic radiation is going to have a huge impact. So one of the consequences of that radiation is a huge oxidative stress. People should be thinking about how do you counter that oxidative stress on top of the exercise requirements that are needed, on top of supplying food, water, to be able to do all that activity. There are really a lot of problems that need to be resolved. ISS is a great starting point. We can start, proposing things and then looking forward to what's going to happen when humans are in fact living on the moon. So I think I'll just stop there, Jeff. Thanks, and I'm sure there'll be some discussion later.
Great, thank you, Richard. Our fifth and final panelist is Thomas Strebe. He served as the head of the Physical and Material Sciences Group in the Research and Exploration Department of the German DLR Space Agency since March 2020, overseeing management coordination of national and international projects related to microgravity research and physical sciences on various microgravity platforms, including drop towers, parabolic flights, sounding rockets, suborbital vehicles, and the International Space Station. He also serves as an advisor to the ESA Program Board for Human Spaceflight, Microgravity, and Exploration. He completed his Ph.D. in 2001 from the University of Bonn on stellar evolution of asymptotic giant branch stars and served as a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute for Radio Astronomy, studying stellar evolution of stars in late evolutionary stages. Thomas, thanks for getting through your various IT issues and being able to join us here.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, so it's great that I can finally join you here. So it's good to see that ISS experiments work much more reliable than my computer, actually. Yeah. So a warm hello also from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. I'm very thankful that I can be part of this panel here today as a kind of European and German representative. I had the honor to be on the ISSRD in 2017 myself, presenting also the German activities in microgravity research. From my perspective, what the last 20 years have shown is what a unique platform the ISS actually is. Unique in terms of the fantastic science that we can conduct on this low Earth orbit platform, and unique also in the sense of the international aspect. So the I in the ISS. So I had the chance to also do a lot of to start a lot of collaborations on the international level via ESA on the one hand side, but also bilaterally between DLR and, for instance, NASA, JAXA, or Roscosmos. We started with the plasma crystal experiments, one of the very first experiments that has been conducted on the ISS 20 years ago. And recently, as also the NASA administrator, Senator Nelson, has said at the beginning, we saw the 5th state of matter on the ISS. So both Einstein condensates are now on the ISS also. And this opens also exciting perspectives for the next years of ISS research. And as the decadal plans show, and also the European ideas for the next couple of years, there's really a lot to come. So we are far from being done with all the research and the bright and conducting all the bright experiments that come from the scientific community. So it's really still a lot to do, and a lot of exciting science, both in life and physical sciences. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Some great introductory comments from all the panelists. We'll bring everyone together here now for some discussion among the panel. One of the first questions I want to bring up is talking about the decadal itself. It's been actually the theme of this session, a lot of discussion about it. Question for Krystyn, maybe you can talk in a little bit more detail about exactly how the decadal will work. You've talked about this white paper submission process that's underway right now. What's involved with that, and then what are the next steps through the rest of the process of actually, creating the decadal survey report?
Thanks, Jeff. The white paper submission process is very simple, but the process itself is extremely valuable to thinking about together. What do we want to prioritize? So I'll emphasize a couple of things. First, the white papers are not about exploration or experiments only using ISS or only using that platform. This is really thinking broadly about what are the research questions that would be answered in the space environment, either enabled by that space environment, answering questions directly related to it, or comparing approaches in different research environments. So the ISS is one of the platforms that can be used. Just want to make clear that Decadal is broader than that in the platforms that could be accessed. It is open to everyone to participate. I know that was one of the questions in terms of, do you need to be in a specific organization? Do you need to have affiliation with NASA or just a university? And the answer is no. Because the Decadal is run through the U.S. National Academies, the audience is primarily in the U.S., but you can see from the panel here today that this type of research is highly collaborative internationally, and we expect and understand that. The kinds of questions that the white papers are seeking to answer are, what are the effects of the space environment on biological systems and processes, physical systems and processes? My own research it spans both worlds, so it's really important to think about also the interface between the two. Could go anywhere from molecular biology to concepts in organism evolution. Number two, what are the effects of the spaceflight environment? And this could include ones directly related to exploration of systems, including human systems, as Richard mentioned, and on primarily physical systems and processes. So that's where you start to think about combustion, fluid behavior, fundamentals. And then finally, gravitation and other space environment effects on space exploration technologies, right? So what do we need to do, as Tara said, as we think about going to the moon and as we think about using the low Earth orbit environment, what are those gravitational effects on the systems and processes? So that's the scope. And then the process itself, I've asked that we share the link with you directly to the Decadal's website, and there you can find the description of the call and how to upload documents. There's two types. One is called topical. So this will be on a specific single research area, particular investigation, particular type of experiment, for example, no matter how complex. And there's no minimum cost or maximum duration. So this is really, what are the ideas out there in the community to go after in the coming decade that are really important to us on Earth and to enabling exploration. The second type of white paper is called a research campaign white paper. These are broader, larger scale goals, could span multiple topics or disciplines, and there's a single defined mission concept. So these are big, hard problems that many people would need to work together on. And so that kind of campaign might have a total project cost on the order of $100 million. So these are large investments that take a long time to plan out together, might include dedicated space flights, for example, might include use of the ISS, and could go on for the whole decade. So those are the two flavors. We're all encouraged to work together. There's many opportunities to get involved. And if you are not in a network that makes that easy for you and you want to submit one individually, certainly also allow. But we're looking to really not just crowdsource the ideas, but start to build and reinforce the communities on what science do we need to go after in the next 10 years, so we can think about the tools, including but not limited to the ISS and the collaboration processes to get there, especially as we span the public and the private sector over the coming decade.
And then in terms of actually producing the Decadal Survey report, what's the process involved in that, and when can we expect the final report to come out?
Yeah, so the process itself spans a couple of years. So those white papers will come in, and there will be a steering committee that has stood up to work with Rob Furl and myself, and then panels that actually support the work of that steering committee. So those panels will include expertise from the community in biological sciences and physical sciences, and those panels receive and read those white papers. I should mention the white papers are also publicly posted, so the information that you're submitting is intended to be shared. And those panels, guided by the steering committee, will produce a report, essentially chapters that set the priorities. In this particular decadal, we're also going to use an approach, especially in the research campaigns, to look at the cost estimates of doing some of the larger science together. So that report will come out over the course of the coming year, so through 2022. We'll be working on that together so that by 2023, that report is out, publicly available. And of course, it's reviewed through the National Academies before it's out for public consumption. There'll also be discussions within the US as it comes out in 2023.
Great. Tara, and I know in other scientific divisions in NASA, the various decadal surveys are treated almost with a reverence in terms of setting priorities and making decisions about future missions. How will the Decadal Survey recommendations feed into NASA's plans for space station research in the coming decade?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. That's a good place to start. Is the Decadal surveys are where NASA gets its recommendations for science. We count on the community of the National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine to pull together the experts to pulse the community for what's important. So for us, in 2011, when the first decadal came out on biological physical sciences, the only option was the International Space Station program, in addition to the ground-based analogs or things like drop towers. Don't forget about those things as well. But now with this new decadal, we're faced with a whole new colorful way of thinking that's a future that doesn't even exist. At least at the time the space station platform existed. Now we're talking about things like commercial LEO destinations, which could be individual modules apart from station that could support a new type of research. It could be new modules that are attached to station that support different kinds of research. So these decadals are critical for NASA to decide what to fund and how to put together a research program for the next 10, 20 years, especially when some of this technology and some of these situations for possible science and technology demonstrations don't even exist yet. So we count on all of the minds that are out there that are on the cutting edge of research, cutting edge of technology, kind of looking across all of the possible platforms Krystyn mentioned before, to tell us what's important to the scientific community, not just for low Earth orbit, but again, also for going back to the moon and staying a longer time. I know there are so many scientists who have been thinking about the moon and Mars for a long, long time, parts of their entire careers. And so now is the time for them to get their message into the white papers and get it to the Decadal Survey and the committee to get those, rejuvenize their ideas, get those ideas back out there in front of where we know we need to go next. And now is your time. So we need everyone to participate. It's really critical for NASA that we get participation from all the best minds.
All right. Thomas, question for you.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Decadal. This is being done in the U.S., but how influential is it in Europe? In Germany and with DLR or with ESA, do you look at the Decadal as shaping any priorities that you make for microgravity research on the space station?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Of course, we always look what our international partners are, say, prioritizing and what their next goals are. This is true for ESA, and this is also true for DLR as a national space agency. I mean, we have some very exciting also bilateral projects with NASA ongoing, for example, in quantum technologies, or maybe also in the future also on plasma crystal research. And also in fluid physics. And then, of course, as Doug is also here, EML, the electromagnetic levitator, is also some facility on the ISS, which is very international. The science community is very international. And there are plans for the next years also to continue with that research and to bring on new experiments. And of course, we have a regular exchange with our international partners in both in life and physical sciences. We have special, say, microgravity committees where international agency members come together to discuss also joint activities and ideas, how to continue the next years, not only on the ISS, but also on other microgravity platforms. I mean, for us, it is also essential to utilize the platforms that have been mentioned before, like drop towers, parabolic flights, sounding rockets, maybe suborbital, also possibility to use suborbital possibilities, all that. Yeah. So therefore, yes, the Decadal, the US Decadal is also important for us, and to exchange also information and ideas, and maybe also to find a way to set joint priorities for the future. Yeah, because I think the strength is really to jointly conduct these experiments on the international level.
Richard, same question for you from the Canadian viewpoint.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So from the Canadian perspective, I mean, Canada is a relatively small partner, but at the same time, make some major contributions like the Canadarm and so on. From the Canadian perspective, we have to have all of our research, or pretty well all of the research done by Canadians on the space station is internationally peer reviewed. So whenever NASA puts out a call, we respond to that. But it's really important to have this collaborative spirit. One of the main tools that we're using on ISS right now is called ECHO. It's an ultrasound device developed by the French Space Agency and European Space Agency. When we do an experiment, we're sitting in Waterloo, Canada. We have engineers sitting in Toulouse, France. We have other engineers sitting in Montreal. We, of course, rely heavily upon the NASA personnel, and so it's a multi-country involvement. Our astronauts have frequently commented on how international our project is. That we have U.S. partners, we have Canadian partners, and European partners. So it's really important, I think, to have the international panel involved in the international interactions of scientists. It certainly cross-fertilizes a lot because, in recent past, different countries have emphasized slightly different things. And, really what we're doing is we're learning as we go on ISS. Not everything is predictable. So it's really, really important that we keep our eyes open and that we respond quickly. A simple example of that fairly recently, not simple in the sense that it was an observation, was the observation of actually developing a thrombus in the jugular vein. So that had an international team looking at it, and now international partners are looking at that specific problem and many other problems. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and Doug, as an active microgravity researcher on the ISS and other platforms, what are some of the key issues for you looking into the decadal? Both thinking about further applications of the ISS, but also this transition to commercial research platforms in low Earth orbit.
I mean, it's exciting times right now in the world of ISS research with our commercial partners. Not only in terms of the breadth of activities that are possible, but also the resources that are now available with specialized crew members coming from the commercial research arms. So I think this is just a time when we're going to be evolving the way we interface between NASA and our commercial providers. And as Tara and Krystyn pointed out, the decadal will be I guess you'd say the guide to how those priorities will be developed by both the agencies and also the commercial partners. They will see, what opportunities are there for advancement, and what are the mechanisms that they can help to change the standard operating procedures that we've been used to for many years, which are, relatively simplified. And now we'd be going in and having some new potential, groundbreaking ways of doing business. So I think what we're at is we're kind of at a crossroads right now, and we're all looking forward to working together to make this thing not only to change the mission that NASA has had, but also make ourselves more efficient.
All right. Tara, as we talk about this long-term transition, and I know, the administrator earlier this morning talked about wanting to extend the ISS through 2030, but at the same time, NASA has this gradual transition plan to shift over to commercial platforms. From a research standpoint, what are you doing to plan for that transition and also make sure that those future commercial platforms have the capabilities that researchers will need to continue the research that they're currently doing on the space station?
So right now, what we do is focus on the needs of the scientific community with regard to the environment that they want to send their payload to. So microgravity is a special, unique requirement, and also some radiation experiments that can be done on station too. So we are currently tactically and a little bit strategically building these roadmaps. It's what we call roadmaps by discipline internally. And we are trying to look out into the future at what our scientific community will need based on what they've done in the past and what we know is going to be important for our agency's missions and for advancing the textbook knowledge. So we keep the proposal opportunities coming and plan for access to the facility. For the space station, that means making sure that we have up mass and down mass, cold stowage, data connection and things like that on a functioning laboratory as we should have for this community, but also looking ahead to while we're waiting for the decadal to come out, looking ahead to what our researchers are telling us they need now. So those opportunities are constantly open in terms of communicating with the scientific community through either the National Lab and their user advisory committee, or through announcements of opportunity that comes from NASA directly. And again, since this is an ongoing research program, NASA's got ongoing research program, we're constantly hearing the needs of the community and thinking about what facilities that need to be added that don't exist, especially as technology develops and advances on Earth, especially in areas of biology and genetics. How can we keep up, and what do we need to do to keep up, and what can NASA do to provide those facilities? And our commercial providers are watching too. How can they participate in making sure that they're meeting the needs of the research community? So for us, it's a matter of building these roadmaps to say, hey, we know that this is coming. The scientific community has these plans. Let's look at our resources that are available, match that, and stay on top of it. When I was in the Space Station Science Office down at the Johnson Space Center, it's pretty much what we did 24 hours a day, was meeting the needs of the scientific community. It's not exactly easy doing science on a space vehicle when you're matching operations with the research needs of the community. So our experts are constantly on top of it. We're constantly thinking, reevaluating tactically versus, and also at the same time looking strategically down the line at what's coming. Now, we're doing that for station, but we're also trying to think creatively on not station. These new suborbital flights that you're hearing about recently, are payloads well suited to take those flights? And drop towers, parabolic, the ground-based analogs, those kinds of things as well. So we're looking at every opportunity that's unique to what exists now on the International Space Station, but we also look across to make sure everyone knows about the capabilities that are here on Earth that are new and developing as well.
Great. Krystyn, since the Decadal Survey is going to span this decade of transition from the ISS to commercial platforms, how will that figure into the Decadal process in terms of, will you get inputs from the commercial space station developers to find out their capabilities to ensure that there's no mismatch between scientific priorities and commercial capabilities? How will that work in terms of just the overall Decadal process?
That's a great question, Jeff. So I think this is an important chicken and egg that Tara has pointed out, right? What research should we prioritize in space? Well, what research can we do in space? Which activities are accommodated by the current platforms, the current staffing, up mass, down mass? So the logistics of what research you can do informs what are your research priorities and vice versa, right? So there's always that tension on the system, even in ground-based research. It's particularly important here over the coming decade that we have that dialogue. So the panel, the Decadal Survey will have the opportunity to talk with all kinds of solution providers through the panel activities, for example. And the folks who serve on those panels and serve on the steering committee include those of us who work in the research community with the private and the public sector. So there's some current knowledge, but I think as we all project forward together, we do need to talk about those possibilities and the constraints. Part of that is that practice of building out these research campaigns. How do you think through that together? What are the options? What are the schedules? And you also have to build in the serendipity of this, right? So the technologies that we have today that we couldn't have imagined a decade ago, that will happen again. And it seems to happen faster and faster in this space. So we'll have to leave some room for what we don't know by the time the Decadal is done, but we'll certainly be talking with all the potential public and private solution providers.
Great. I want to get to a couple of audience questions that have come in. There's still time to submit questions through the Q&A function on the platform in the final minutes here. A question probably good for both Doug and Thomas, since you're both experienced researchers on both the ISS and other microgravity platforms. The audience question is, we've heard different viewpoints on whether down mass to Earth or investments in situ analysis are key to the future of LEO research. What are your viewpoints on this? What is more important?
Doctor, you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I'll have a brief intro here. I mean, I think it's obviously important that both are highly important. It kind of goes down to a cost-benefit analysis. That you can do some things cheaper on Earth than putting in a whole facility on the station. But then the other side of the coin is maybe it's better to be able to do the experiments quickly up there and get your information, so that you can then adapt your next set of experiments. But, key limiting time thing here is you have this need for astronaut time. And with this increase in the potential for astronaut time with the commercial astronaut corps, this actually makes in situ slightly more attractive than it has been in the past. And in the past, we've always had to have mostly roboticized activities where we would do what we call telescience, where you're controlling an instrument from ground, and that instrument, of course, had a very high capital cost because of its need for being able to be controlled from the ground. To try to give the astronauts plenty, they're spread so thin. So I think it's really important to realize both are important, and we'll evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. Thomas?
Yeah, I'm fully in line with you, Doug, of course. Yeah, I mean, in material sciences, so we have experiments where you really bring your samples up there, and then they are processed up there in furnace, for instance, and then you bring them down again for the analysis. Yeah? But we also have experiments now, like the transparent alloys experiment, or in the future maybe even an X-ray facility, that where you can really do in situ material sciences on the space station. I guess the limiting factors, as Doug said, is first of all is crew time, and secondly maybe also the data downlink rate. Yeah, so if you produce a lot of video data, we see that, for instance, now in the plasma crystal physics. Yeah, we really have to record the data on hard disks, and then they have to bring down the hard disk, because we generate so many terabytes of data that we cannot easily just say download them from the station just via hard disks. Yeah, so I think these are more the limitations at the moment.
Great. Another audience question, maybe Tara, will start with you on this, since you've already touched on a little bit of this to some degree. How will the focus of research on the ISS through the next decade be oriented? Will research focus continuously evolve based on Earth's needs, such as an emphasis on the pandemic?
Oh, yes, it's going to be whatever the world needs at the time. Over the next 10 years, anything could happen. And that's what this decadal is about, trying to anticipate it all. I don't think that we're looking ahead right now. We're thinking about X amount of time for Earth-based advancements, X amount of time for space exploration. It's about the good science. It's about the maximum science that you can get from this laboratory. So looking out into the future, I'm quite sure, given my 20 years experience working for station, that we will do the best to meet the needs of the agency as things evolve and as things change. And right now, and as we see things looking out, we're very firmly invested in returning humans to live sustainably on the moon, as we can learn there, and then thinking past the moon onto Mars. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And then we're definitely, as you heard a lot about today, looking at the importance of building a low Earth orbit economy. So, trying to decide what's going to ebb and flow in terms of how you split those two things in research, I don't think that's possible. I think what we're going to do is keep evaluating the good science, starting with the recommendations that come out of the decadal, and then working with the scientific community on upcoming research announcements and letting them iterate on their good science, not just science, but the technology developments that we could use the low Earth orbit platform for as well.
Yeah. I guess, and Krystyn, how do you incorporate, these ever-changing science priorities and, new innovations and such into the decadal when you're trying to look out a decade, and uncertain where the next great innovations and discoveries might be?
Right. Well, it's certainly not up to one person, but I can tell you, where do I sit in terms of prioritizing the research that I seek funding for and I collaborate with others for, and I think I'm not alone in the folks who'll be working in the decadal on this. I think what you assume is when you do research that is this challenging and this exciting and this resource intensive, that the question isn't, is it good science? Really, the filter is, so what? And what I mean by that is, let's assume that really smart people work together to enable the study and answer that research question. Is that new knowledge really going to move the needle in terms of human exploration or life on Earth? Or is it boutique, or is it antique that by the time the study concludes, you're like, So I think that's really it. It's so what? Let's assume that all the Taras of the world will work to enable the experiments, and all the Dougs of the world will work to design really important academic questions. What do you do with that knowledge? And hopefully that will be the filter that we use in the decadal.
Great. We're almost out of time, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to make some closing marks and maybe just sort of emphasize what you see as the biggest opportunity in ISS research in the next decade. We'll go sort of in the reverse order as we did in the introduction. So Thomas, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for this very interesting panel, first of all. And as we have seen here from the discussions, there's still a lot to come and a lot of exciting, experiments upcoming in the next couple of years. I mean, what we compile now for the decadals and roadmaps, this is actually something we do then already in the second next step, I think, because we still have some things to do from the last decadals and from the last roadmaps, which haven't been conducted yet. So, I think this is I think this is an important point, that we first of all do the things that were already decided to do. My personal view is that we will see some very exciting things in fundamental research on the ISS. I mean, this quantum technology era has just been started. And so this is my personal feeling, that in the physical sciences, there will be a lot of new exciting results coming from quantum technologies in the fundamental physics area, but also then towards application-oriented research. I mean, this is also one thing. You start with very basic and fundamental questions, and this is also an important driver then for technology developments. And then in the next step, you have some applications, like now then quantum sensors, optical clocks as an example here. Yeah? And what I think is always important is also to ask, what is the benefit on Earth for all of that? I mean, it's the inspiration, is answering fundamental questions or a fundamental view of the world. This is one thing, but we see also then a lot of applications also coming out, which are actually beneficial for all of us on Earth. Yeah, and this is true for life and for physical sciences at the same time, I guess. And well, I think we have really some bright future ahead of us. Yeah.
Great, Richard. Biggest opportunity for the next decade.
Okay, well, I mean, ultimately we have to keep astronauts healthy and bring them back to Earth alive, and not in a condition where they have advanced cardiovascular disease or risk for other diseases. So we really do need to develop things that are related to how to keep them healthy. So I heard Scott Smith, who's the head of nutrition and biochemistry at NASA, say recently, we do not have the ability yet to sustain life for long periods of time without resupply from Earth. So there are many things from a nutrition side, exercise side, radiation side, and sociological and psychological side. There are many problems still to be dealt with to maintain astronaut health as we move forward.
All right, Tara.
So, like I said, I've been following the space science world since I was a kid, actually, before I came to work at NASA. And I am just marveling at the fact that I've been placed smack in the middle of the scientific revolution in space. And so you're all in it. You're all in it with me. I think the biggest opportunity for the next decade is actually now, because we are all standing on the opportunity through this Decadal Survey to tell NASA to speak what the scientific community wants over the next 10 years in space. So I think opportunity-wise, to me, it's not the technology or the science advancements. It's about personal participation now and getting your thoughts in and participating in this decadal. So, so that you are all a continued legacy of using the microgravity environment to advance science and technology.
Great. Doug.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I see two things that one is building off of what Tara just said, and that's the human capital side. We have the next generation of scientists we're going to be training here. And this is really an exciting time for them, because there's going to be a whole new set of problems. And that leads into my second key topic, and that's we need to be nimble. We're going to be having new information coming from our studies on, well, what's it like to start a colony on the moon? How do we adapt to trying to produce food during a transit operations? What is the what is the impact of radiation, and how do you build material? How do you build structures on the moon? Because you can't carry concrete and steel over there. So there's going to be some really cool new things, and we're going to have to adapt as we go. So that's one of the things that's really nice about the decadal process, is that it emphasizes these big picture ideas. It doesn't tell you a blueprint on how you're going to get there. It's that we have this problem and we need to investigate it. And therefore, we need to be nimble about how we utilize the resources that we have in order to address that new knowledge.
All right. And finally, Krystyn.
Well, I think so many important things have already been said. I think what I can add here really builds off of what Doug said. So on that human capital side, it's Some of us were space geeks as kids. I have no NASA-funded research, but I'm definitely a space geek. You know, the stickers are on my laptop. Space Camp, the movie, one of my favorites, right? But we're not using all of the folks, all of the minds we can in the US to be nimble, to think about the next questions. So also making this decadal and the outcomes of it much more inclusive so that more people are involved in understanding the value, developing the technology, answering the questions, analyzing the data that's posted and publicly available. So getting more of the community, a broader, more inclusive community, I think that can be part of what we start in the decadal. It's something we should really expect of ourselves and hold ourselves accountable as we implement the priorities of the decadal in the coming decade.
All right. Well, thanks to Krystyn, Doug, Tara, Thomas, and Richard for a great panel discussion. I think you now have a feeling for what to expect for the next decade and what you and the research community can do to help shape that. And so with that, I will hand things back over to Krystyn, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for all the panelists' insights. It was really interesting to listen to that discussion, and we look forward to the outcome of that decadal study. Every year, NASA and the ISS National Lab have the honor of recognizing individuals and organizations for compelling research conducted in the challenging microgravity environment. Throughout the conference this year, we will be awarding winners for both 2020 and 2021. Please join me now to watch some of these talented researchers receive their awards.
Hi, I'm Kirk Costello, the ISS Program Chief Scientist, and it's great to have you with us this year for our 10th annual ISSRDC conference. We've already been flying for 20 years on the ISS, and during that time, the research done on ISS has amounted to more than 3,000 investigations by more than 4,000 researchers from more than 100 countries. We're so very proud to be able to recognize some of those researchers today in our annual ISS Awards ceremony. This past year with COVID has been very difficult, but still, we've managed to make improvements to our crew and cargo commercial capabilities. We've been able to augment our solar arrays to take us well into the next decade of science. And lastly, we've just launched a new major module to the space station, Nauka, named for science in Russian. It's a great time to be on ISS and be a researcher using the unique capabilities of this microgravity laboratory. The next decade really does look poised to be more productive than even our first two combined. But here today, we're talking about people who exemplify the research and the innovation that goes on board the space station. Each year, we reach out to our research sponsors to identify those teams that have best exemplified this characteristic. So we have results today in both compelling results and innovation categories to present to you. Over the next 3 days, we'll be presenting 14 awardees. So let's get started with the first 6.
Our first award is for compelling results in the area of human health in space and goes to the Autonomous Medical Officer Support, or AMOS, technology demonstration team from NASA's Johnson Space Center. Successful performance of medical tasks on missions beyond low Earth orbit requires new solutions to replace real-time Earth-based expertise. The AMOS software platform provides just-in-time instruction that allows users with different experience levels to access information as needed. In April 2020, AMOS was successfully tested on the ISS to support urinary bladder and kidney ultrasound examinations. A non-physician astronaut performed these ultrasound exams on a crewmate, and the captured images were later reviewed by experts to rate their quality. The demonstration exceeded expectations, yielding a positive user experience and successful image collection. AMOS provides training and support using a single tool for knowledge acquisition, retention, and application, a capability that has many potential uses in space and on Earth. Sponsored by the Italian Space Agency, our next award is also for a compelling result in human health in space. It goes to Mauro Maccarone, Campus Biomedico at the University of Rome. Dr. Maccarone's SARASEM project investigated changes in the production and regulation of proteins during differentiation of osteoblasts, or bone-building cells, induced by the drug rapamycin. Blood-derived stem cells are ideal candidates to study bone mass loss that affects astronauts, as these cells are able to differentiate into many different cell types. To greatly oversimplify, results obtained by the SARASEM project show how genes involved in embryonic stem cell maintenance are modulated in space, in this case, driving a decrease in bone-building cell production. Further, this study demonstrates how the easy accessibility of blood-derived stem cells compared to other stem cells makes them a promising tool, potentially useful for monitoring and/or treating osteoporosis, not only in space, but also on Earth. Our next award for innovation in physical science and materials development goes to the Electrostatic Levitation Furnace Development Team of Japan's Aerospace Exploration Agency. The measurement of thermophysical properties of materials melting at high temperatures is strongly affected by impurities. To avoid this problem, electromagnetic, aerodynamic, and electrostatic levitation techniques are widely used. JAXA's Electrostatic Levitation Furnace, or ELF, was launched to the ISS in 2015 and is a unique facility. It is capable of measuring thermophysical properties such as density, surface tension, and viscosity of rare metal oxides with very high melting temperatures. Accomplishments of note include measuring the density of gadolinium oxide, the surface tension of erbium oxide, and viscosity of terbium oxide, all of which are first-time-in-the-world measurements. Research performed in the ELF has already generated numerous scientific papers, while the experimentally determined material properties are being used as input parameters, improving the accuracy of modeling and simulation software. In addition to fundamental research, ELF is also used by several commercial companies, making it a stellar example of innovation driving increased research capability on the ISS, resulting in more scientific knowledge to benefit us all. Our next award for innovation in technology development and demonstration goes to Daniel Faber of OrbitFab. Daniel Faber was principal investigator for OrbitFab's technology demonstration, sponsored by the ISS National Laboratory, that successfully tested the functionality of a tanker that can refuel spacecraft in orbit from a collapsible fuel tank called the Flex Tank. The Flex Tank can be launched compressed and then filled in orbit. Through this investigation, the team successfully validated the transfer of fluid from the tanker to the Flex Tank while in orbit. The team also tested how well the internal baffling in the tanker reduces motion from the flow of liquid as the tanker empties, as well as how the Flex Tank reacts in microgravity. This investigation allowed OrbitFab to raise the technology readiness level, or TRL, of their tanker technology from TRL-3 to TRL-8. Using OrbitFab's innovative tanker technology, spacecraft could save on launch mass and volume by launching with compressed tanks that are filled once in orbit. That fuel could also be used to refuel satellites. This innovative technology has the potential to extend satellite life, enable economically viable markets in satellite servicing, and potentially open new markets. Their tanker spacecraft, Tanker 001 Tenzing, will launch on a SpaceX rideshare mission later this year, and we are excited to see the technology they tested on ISS applied to their commercial endeavors. Our next award for compelling results in human health in space goes to Chris Mason of Weill Cornell. Chris Mason is a geneticist and computational biologist who has been a principal investigator and co-investigator on 7 NASA missions and projects. He is a prolific scientist and a tremendous communicator. Chris's research has elevated the quality of astronaut health research epochs above its previous state. The very first grant Chris wrote when he started his lab in 2010 was to NASA to examine the DNA and RNA changes from spaceflight. At the time, samples were not routinely collected for omics work, nor had any protocols been developed yet for performing work like RNA sequencing or DNA sequencing from astronaut samples, or to do so in space. With the announcement of the Twins study, he already had a grant ready to submit and a chance to realize a dream he'd had since he was a kid at space camp. His work has also led to collaborations with NASA to establish methods and protocols for DNA and RNA sequencing in microgravity, and then in space itself, which we can now use for future missions. Chris also published a book recently called The Next 500 Years: Engineering Life to Reach New Worlds. We are sure that our future in space will be safer thanks to Chris Mason's research. Our final award today is for compelling results in physical science and materials development and goes to NASA's Cold Atom Lab research team. The Cold Atom Lab is a one-of-a-kind facility for the investigation of an ultra-cold fifth state of matter known as Bose-Einstein condensate, or BEC. Microgravity allows the atoms to be manipulated by weaker magnetic fields, speeding cooling and allowing clearer imaging of BECs before diffusing. In a groundbreaking study, this team of researchers examined the cooling and trapping of atomic gases to form a BEC, allowing quantum behavior to be inspected at a macroscopic scale for long durations in microgravity. Scientists observed this fifth state of matter in microgravity for the first time, offering unprecedented insight into Einstein's theory of relativity. Studying BECs in microgravity opens additional research arenas in gravitational waves, spacecraft navigation, and prospecting for subsurface minerals on the Moon and other planetary bodies. The opportunity to study BEC's new geometry in space reinforces the need for the space station as a facility to conduct research in the field of ultra-cold atomic physics. Daily life applications on Earth could include the development of quantum computers. Additionally, with routine BEC production, continued operations on the ISS will support new investigations of unique trap topologies, atom laser sources, few body systems, and trailblazing techniques for atom wave interferometry.
Congratulations to all of our award winners, each one extremely well deserved. We're going to take a quick break here, but be sure to join us back at 12:30 for a panel on in-space production applications, followed by a terrific conversation with Dr. Bill Wagner, Director of the McGowan Institute for Regenerative Medicine and an organizing partner in the Biomanufacturing in Space Symposium. See you back here in a bit.